I ruled out 2 entire cities on my original shortlist without ever getting on a single plane, based on one specific data point that most investors never even think to check before committing real money. This is the exact scoring system I use to pick expansion markets from behind a laptop, and it's the reason I haven't made a single bad market decision yet this season. Early on, my instinct was to pick markets based on cities I already knew personally, places I'd visited, places that felt familiar and comfortable. That instinct is exactly backwards for this model. Familiarity has nothing to do with whether a market actually generates corporate housing demand. After nearly picking a market purely because I liked visiting it on vacation once, I forced myself to build an actual scoring system instead, one based entirely on public data anyone can pull up online, so personal bias could not quietly steer a decision this important. It felt genuinely strange at first, committing real money and a real furnishing budget to a city I'd never physically walked through or seen with my own eyes. But the data either supports a market or it doesn't, and ignoring that in favor of a gut feeling is exactly how this model would fail at scale. In this episode, I'm walking through the 5 specific data points I score every candidate city against, the exact signal that eliminated 2 cities from my original shortlist, and the 3 markets I ended up choosing instead, with the real reasoning behind each one. The first thing I score is large employer concentration, meaning how many major companies, hospital systems, or manufacturing operations are headquartered or expanding in that city. More large employers directly translates into more relocating staff, more traveling project teams, and more corporate housing demand overall. I pull this from public economic development announcements and local business journal coverage, which are both free and updated constantly. A city with one large hospital system and a growing manufacturing base scores far higher on this metric than a city with mostly small local businesses and no major employer anchoring the local economy. On one market I evaluated this season, a single hospital system alone had over 4,000 employees, with a documented pattern of bringing in traveling specialists on 90-day rotations, which told me corporate housing demand there wasn't seasonal or speculative. It was already happening whether I showed up or not. The second signal is healthcare-related housing demand, specifically, primarily traveling nurses and allied health staff on temporary assignment. This demand base has grown significantly over the past few years and tends to be extremely reliable, since hospital staffing shortages don't disappear overnight. I check active job board postings for travel nursing positions in a given metro area, along with published staffing agency data where it's publicly available, which together give a reasonably current picture of real, ongoing demand, rather than a stale historical snapshot. A city posting dozens of active travel nurse openings at any given time is a city where furnished, month-plus housing demand already exists independent of anything I do. In the strongest of my 3 chosen markets, I counted over 60 active travel nursing postings in a single search, each one representing a real person who would need exactly the kind of furnished 30-day-plus unit this business is built to provide. The third signal is insurance displacement and corporate relocation housing activity, meaning how often people in that city end up needing temporary furnished housing due to a home being repaired after damage, or an employee relocating for a new job before permanent housing is arranged. Markets with more housing turnover, more corporate relocation, and more insurance claims involving displacement tend to have consistent demand. This demand has nothing to do with tourism or seasonal travel at all, which makes that demand far more stable month to month. This is also the segment most investors overlook entirely, because it doesn't show up in typical short-term rental market research. Only in insurance industry and relocation industry data most real estate investors never bother pulling. The fourth signal sounds backwards the first time you hear it. I actually look for cities with stricter short-term rental regulation, not looser regulation. Here's why. Tight regulation on nightly rentals pushes casual competitors out of the furnished housing space entirely, since they cannot legally operate the way they used to. That leaves the midterm, 30-day-plus corporate housing model, which typically falls outside those same restrictions entirely, with far less competition, fighting over the same properties and the same pool of qualified tenants. One market I evaluated had passed a strict 90-day minimum stay requirement for any rental under 30 days just the year before, which had already pushed out a large share of casual Airbnb hosts and left the furnished midterm space wide open. Here's the signal that actually eliminated 2 cities from my original shortlist. Both of those markets scored well on employers and healthcare demand, but both had almost no published data on local property management companies willing to handle remote coordination, meaning maintenance calls, cleaning coordination, and emergency repairs. Without a reliable local network already operating in that city, running a unit there remotely becomes nearly impossible to manage well. That single missing signal, more than any of the 4 positive ones, was enough to disqualify both cities completely, no matter how strong the rest of their numbers looked on paper. I actually called 3 different local property management companies in each of those 2 cities before making the final call, and in both markets, every single one either didn't return my call within a week or explicitly said they don't handle remote owner coordination at all. Let me walk you through what scoring an actual city looks like in practice, start to finish. I start with a simple spreadsheet, 1 row per candidate city, 1 column per signal, scored 0 to 10. On one city I evaluated this season, employer concentration scored a 9, thanks to a major hospital expansion underway. Healthcare and travel nurse demand scored an 8, based on active job postings. Insurance and relocation activity scored a 6, solid but not exceptional. Short-term rental regulations scored a 9, since the city had just tightened its rules significantly. And then vendor network availability, the disqualifying signal, came back at a 2 because I couldn't find a single responsive local property manager willing to handle remote coordination. 4 strong scores and 1 critical failure was enough to eliminate that entire city from consideration, regardless of how good the rest of the profile looked. After scoring roughly a dozen candidate cities against all 5 of these signals, I landed on 3 markets to start this season. Each one scored strongly on employer concentration and healthcare demand, sat in a state with meaningfully tightening short-term rental rules that worked in my favor rather than against me, and, critically, already had an established, responsive local vendor network I could personally verify existed before committing a single dollar of real money to any property there. None of the 3 were cities I'd ever lived in or even visited for more than a layover, and that fact stopped bothering me almost immediately once the data lined up this clearly across every single signal. 2 of the 3 are mid-sized metro areas that most national real estate content never even mentions, which if anything works in my favor, since less obvious markets tend to attract far less competition. People often assume a system like this must take weeks to run properly, so let me be specific about the real-time cost. Fully researching and scoring one candidate city takes me somewhere around 4 to 6 hours total, spread across a couple of days while I wait on callbacks. Scoring a shortlist of 10 to 12 candidate cities realistically takes one focused week of evening work alongside everything else already running in the business. That's a real-time investment, but it's a fraction of what physically visiting even 3 or 4 cities in person would cost in both time and travel expense. I want to be honest about what this scoring system cannot tell me. It cannot tell me how a specific neighborhood feels or how responsive a specific vendor will actually turn out to be. Remote market selection reduces risk significantly, it doesn't eliminate it, and I fully expect at least one of these 3 markets to underperform the other 2 by the time this season wraps up. I'd rather say that plainly now than pretend every market decision made purely from a spreadsheet is guaranteed to work out perfectly in practice. The bigger lesson underneath all of this has less to do with real estate specifically and more to do with removing gut feeling from decisions that are actually big enough to matter. Any business expanding into a new market benefits from replacing familiarity and comfort with an actual scoring system built on public data. It's a slower way to decide, and a far more defensible one when a decision goes wrong and you actually need to understand exactly why. So that's the full system. Employer concentration, healthcare and travel nurse demand, insurance and relocation activity, short-term rental regulation, and local vendor network availability. 5 signals scored against public data with zero need to ever step on a plane before committing real capital to a new city. If you want to see exactly how I funded the first units in these markets without touching my own savings, subscribe so you catch that breakdown next. Next episode, I'm showing you the exact business credit structure I used to fund 10 units without a single dollar of personal cash, including the one financing mistake that almost cost me a real deal in the first 30 days. That full story is right there in the next video.